What's up, guys? You know what night it is? Wednesday night, off-centered with Dustin, the sports card dad. You have now earned
How
the
are you?
sports card dad versus the artist formerly known as personal finance dad, because that's got to be what, 6 months ago,
It's
something
been
like that.
if not longer. Yeah, I guess about 6 months. That sounds about right. It
Yeah,
feels
yeah,
like forever. It fits. It's starting to
yes.
fit. It's growing on me.
Oh, that's a good name. I'm glad I thought of it. Anyway, guys, tonight's going to be fun because we have the director of the sports card documentary Behind the Card on with us. His name's Chris Fitzgerald. I met him and his wife back in, I guess, early 2021 when we filmed this. And I'm so honored to be a part of this documentary, which really encapsulates the time that that crazy period in sports cards from 2020 and 2021. So we're going to be talking about the film, some of the reviews, what he's going to be doing next, and what the whole point of this documentary was, and what it could do for the hobby. So really excited about that. But first, let's say hi to a couple people here in the audience. We got Ziggy, always in the house. Great to see you, Ziggy. Watching the movie right now to prepare for the show. Ryan McClanahan, we need more movies about sports cards, but I'm worried the content may be lopsided from all the hobby business insiders and not collectors. Well, that's a good point, because if collectors were gonna put in this amount of money, it would, like, where would they get their return? Unless the movie was going to make the money, but a lot of times the
Right.
businesses see the
Yeah.
return.
So Ryan, you don't feel that Brad being in the movie kind of covered all of those bases? Mike C, what's up?
Good to see Mike C. Shane's in the house as well. What's up, Global Sports Card Investor, Phoenix Rising 2430, and Judson from Santa Monica. Great to see you as well. I could go for some popcorn. Philly Joe, great to see you. Thanks for joining. Hope to see you this Friday as well on the Card Life live stream. And yeah, does Chris make a cameo? He makes a couple cameos. In fact, I thought what was so funny is that when I watched the movie, knowing what Chris looked like the whole time from when we had met, I was like, oh man, you're the good guy. And now you're the shady guy. And now you're the good guy again. Now you're the shady flipper, dude. So, dude, it was really cool watching, but we'll bring him on in just a second. Good to see Brendan as well. And looks like I said on Dustin's video here for the comment section. Like I said okay, we'll take it. Did not mention the diapers. Okay, Dustin, what's up with you, man? How's everything going? How's Thanksgiving?
Yeah, Thanksgiving was good. We were up in a cabin in the middle of nowhere in Ohio with 30 of my in-laws. I mean, what could be better? No, actually, I really like my in-laws, so it was
30?
good. Yeah, it was probably maybe 25. Yeah, but it's all the cousins, the grandparents. It was good. The grandparents are in their 90s, so it's kind of one of those things where you have to get together. I mean, who knows? Maybe they'll live to be 110, but no, it was good. I'm a little bit stressed right now because my Kim is flying back from New York, and she's landing in like 10 minutes. And my oldest daughter is going to pick her up from the airport, but never has picked up anyone from the airport. So she's all frazzled. Like, what do I go to departures, arrivals? Are there going to be a lot of signs? So I'm just watching my phone for like, I can't find her, like this like dramatic deal. I told her not to call me, though. I'm not available. She can text. So if you see me kind of look down, I'm paying attention, but that's just something I might have to handle here in a few minutes.
Okay. And I know how stressful it could be picking someone up from the airport, just because if you miss the wrong terminal or that wrong turn, you got to loop all the way around, and that's
At least
stressful.
with Raleigh, it's not like Atlanta. I mean, like it's not a huge airport. So hopefully she's
Or
fine.
LAX.
Or LAX. Yeah,
Or
exactly.
Miami. I think Miami is one of the worst too.
Oh,
But
Miami's terrible. Yeah, Miami's terrible.
good stuff, man.
How about you? What did you do? Did you hang out with, like, were you alone on Thanksgiving? What did you do?
Not this
You
year.
don't have,
No.
I know you don't have a family, but or your family's in Florida, right?
Families in Florida. Yeah, it's not worth going back to Florida because it's just my parents, and they don't really celebrate because they're not from America, so it's not really a thing. But I did spend Thanksgiving with this girl I've been seeing, so it was really nice.
Was it with her family or just with her?
Just with her. Just with her. Nice place, nice, intimate dinner for two.
Damn, I was hoping you'd have stories about how you met her family and it was a complete disaster. This is too like
maybe next Thanksgiving. We'll see.
okay.
We'll see.
Right.
But yeah, really nice Thanksgiving. So, dude, no complaints. Really good. I've started watching a show called The Boys, and it sounds
I've heard of
horrible.
it.
I know.
Yeah.
If it's a good show, if you watch The Boys on Amazon Prime, let me know in the comment section. So I've kind of dove into that the other day, and I'm like just going crazy watching that because sports are not that good right now, except for the World Cup, because both of our teams suck.
It's kind of funny how it's just a battle. Our division is just a battle of just horrible teams.
Yeah,
But,
dude.
yeah,
And then Monday Night Football's coming up,
it's Bucks
where
week.
the 5 and
Yeah.
6 Bucks and what the 4 and 7
4 and
Saints,
8.
4 and 8 Saints. I
Saints.
mean, and the sad thing is the Bucks still have the number 1 seed in the NFC South with a losing record.
Yeah, we have I mean, at 4 and 8, we're still in it because we've got
Dude.
the head-to-head with the Bucks, and yeah, I mean, we have an outside chance.
Dude,
So you're
yeah.
telling me there's a chance.
So anyway, so football's not been that good. So I have been watching that show, which I don't really like to watch too many shows just because it can get addictive. But one thing I did watch was the documentary. I think we watched it on Thanksgiving, me and the girl at her place. So let's bring on the director right now, Chris Fitzgerald, as you take a sip of Four Loko. I'm assuming that's Four Loko.
Liquid Death. It's water.
Right
It's
on.
not fake beer. It's the new water company. So
But it's the coolest water you could
the
drink.
coolest water you can get. Kind of looks like I'll hold it in front of me, but kind of looks like
A beer.
yeah, it kind of looks like a Corona, right? But it's
Yeah.
water.
Yeah, that's
You know why I like it? The can, you can't taste the can. You know, a lot of times you taste the can in liquids. Can't taste it at all.
No metallic taste.
yeah.
Shout out Liquid Death.
I think that's Peter Pham's company, and
no way.
a friend of mine knows Peter Pham, but yeah, he sold that for like $700 million. So
Yeah.
Good for
I heard
him.
It was close to $1 billion already. It's crazy.
Yeah,
It's not even
solid.
everywhere. It's not really everywhere yet either. So it's got a lot of room to grow.
there you go. You're doing the advertising for him. But dude, welcome to the show, man. For one, I want to thank you for having me on the documentary. It was so random to get a DM from your wife, Paula, back in.
That was going to be my first question for Chris is why is Brad in this movie?
Yeah, for one, why am I in the movie? But two, yeah, it's funny because I don't read DMs on Instagram, and then Paula messaged me, and it was one of the few DMs I read, and I was like, "Oh my god, is this serious?" And then I was like, "All right, is this a scam?" So, for one, thanks for having me on.
You thought it was one of the 1.4% of the females watching the channel, and you're like, I feel like I have to read this.
Honestly, if Chris, if you would have reached out, I probably wouldn't have opened it. But because it was a female, it was probably like, wait, what could this possibly be? And then so I was curious, and then
And my wife's a beautiful Colombian, so
yeah,
There you go.
I don't blame you for opening it.
There you go, man. But anyway, tell us a bit about, what made you even direct this. You don't have a directing background, and now to create a sports car documentary of all the documentaries you can make. What inspired you to create this movie?
Yeah, so I think when you look at doing a documentary itself, in order to do it as best as you can, because it's not like a normal feature film. If you're going to do a feature film and you're going to go spend $10 million on it to make $100 million, a documentary just lives there, right? And it's a lot of times you don't just make money on docs. So you got to really do it in kind of a space that you love, I would say, right? And I've always loved the car community. My dad worked like along a shop when we were younger. I got to see what that looked like. I saw him at a young age sell more cars than I've ever seen, just from a stockpile in a garage to somebody in a large sale back in the day. He took me to car shops, stuff like that. So it was just ingrained with me. I mean, we used to run. So I ran cross country in middle school, and me and my dad would do races around the neighborhood for, I don't know if you guys remember the 90s, some of the baseball cards packs started to come out with like little gold coins with baseball players actually on them. And I thought they were so cool. So I would we would pull our best gold coin out player and say, hey, we'll race around the park for you and stuff like that. So at a very young age, I was doing a lot of that. And then like a lot of people, I got out, kind of moved on. And I moved from LA to Vegas during quarantine and a little bit after quarantine. And it was call it mid 2020. And we were more in a suburban area. And what happens, the wife, Paula, wants to go to Target. And I snagged there was one Prism basketball box there, and I looked at the shelves, I'm like, oh, cards! I haven't seen this in a long time, right? And got lucky. There was a Zion in it. I never seen another Prism box ever again on the shelf, because it was like that time I didn't know how lucky it was. But I went back, and there was like maybe Heritage or Open Day, whatever's during that mid-year that's not big for baseball. And I actually went online and I saw how much Zion was being, going for at the time. And it was like a $25 box, right? Or $20 box at the time. So I went back a few times. I thought, oh, this is weird. Like maybe the distributor, because of COVID, is not putting them out, but it was like the opposite, right? Everybody wanted them. So I kind of caught Mosaic a little bit there on basketball. All of a sudden, my wife literally saw me bringing 20, 30 packages, because I started selling all my cards on eBay that I could get. And like 20, 30 packages a day I was sending out in cards. And last year I did roughly, like, I got a 1099 from eBay, probably like everybody else. I actually did about 86,000 in sales on eBay. So, from a card collecting standpoint in general, like I'm pretty involved from that, even from a financial standpoint, in terms of like how much I love to rip. But when she saw I was bringing so many packages down, she was like, what's going on? She knew that there was like a need for a higher end content during the time frame, because everybody kind of shut down productions, like Disney even, right? And they weren't really putting out movies because no movie theaters were open. So that's a long-winded version of saying, hey, there was a need to do something, and we chose to do it in sports card documentary because I was having so much fun in the space, and I had knowledge in it in the past. And that was like mid-year when we decided to do that. We spent 4 to 6 months over the time frame of just going online and taking in as much as we could across the board. And then we started building out the team that we thought would make a kind of a good perspective. At least we'll get into it, but like, we interviewed a lot of different people, and we went with the cast that we went with for various reasons. And we filmed it in April to May of 2021. And that's how it all got started.
So did you go to school for this sort of thing? And did you do all the editing work and all that? Because the production level is high. You can tell that it's not like, if this is your debut, it's a pretty good debut as far as the production level goes. Did you bring people on to help you with that? Or is that something you guys had a background in and comfortable with?
That's a great question. I like to joke that I don't even have a TikTok account. I'm in that era of kind of too late, too old, too young for a lot of the video chat stuff. So my background, I create businesses. So I have an HR business, and I have other businesses. My wife was first employee of a company that went public back in 2020. So we have a really good understanding of kind of how to do, business modeling around who to hire and who not. So we knew we wanted to make this a feature film. So what do you have to do? You have to have a high production, value there, and you have to go find the right people. So our cinematography person, which does the lighting and makes sure that like how everything is just done on set with the cameras and lighting. He's worked on things like the second to last Batman, right? So we went and got really high-end production people. Our producer worked on Jason Bourne, a movie I don't really like, but Mall Cop, Paul Blart 2.
My favorite.
Still a feature film, I'm not a big fan of it.
Brad was also in that one too.
Yeah.
I was Paul Blart.
First one was great, but second one was just like,
I got even more bloated for the Paul Blart movie than I did for Behind the Card.
And we felt like, one of our strengths is putting teams together that are really good at what they do. And we put a good crew of like 6 to 8 people that essentially traveled around with us. So, people don't really know where we filmed it at. Some people think we filmed it in Puerto Rico or whatnot, but in actuality, we went to every single person's location, whether that was their home or business. So we actually flew around the country to every single location to do this in person. Because one of the things from a feature film, especially at the time when everyone was doing everything virtual, I really wanted to focus on doing everything in person. So that also kind of hurt us with a couple of people that we wanted to interview because we couldn't do it in person, whether they were having a baby or they just had one. They had someone that had immune deficiency in their family, something like that, where they couldn't chance it. Right. So that kind of hurts.
Can you name maybe a few people that you wanted to get to, but it just couldn't happen for a variety of reasons?
Yeah. Like, and we can get into kind of like different sections of who we chose or not as well, but kind of off front, like who I would love to have in was like Phil Hughes, how he does like, card breaks. He was a ex-Yankee pitcher. We couldn't get it done with him. Part of the reason is we decided not to go to California for various reasons in terms of how a feature film is done with production. And then also one of the, I guess, highlighted people that would have been cool is we reached out to Gary Payton. We were getting close to trying to get something done with him, just to have a basketball presence, and couldn't get it done. And it was a struggle in a few ways with talent, because it was the hardest time to get a hold of somebody. And it was the hardest time to get someone to say, yeah, bring people, 8 people to my crew, where you're still flying. Like, I'm flying in everywhere with a crew of me, Paula, and say 8 of us. And we have to get tested when we get there. And then we have to get tested when we leave, because like there's COVID policies, and, from a legal standpoint, it's crazy how much you have to do from a theatrical film perspective, especially during COVID. So, getting everybody to sign off on the right documents, and then actually having even just finding a spot for us all to get tested, because like testing was hard back then too. If you ever traveled during that time, it's like, what Walgreens is going to take you that's not five weeks out of finding an appointment, right? Kind of thing. So I'll stop there.
Well, it's funny because even here in California, as I talk to some of my friends that are in the industry, it's still very strict with COVID stuff. As in, people still wear masks on set, have to have COVID tests before and after. It's very strict in that industry. And I think part of the reason is that they say, well, if an actor or a talent gets it, then no one can work, and the whole project is destroyed, or the budget now doubles, or whatever it is. But I think Southern California is very tough, but also the industry, I'm sure you had a lot of issues getting around COVID, and then making the film look like it's not dated, so that it's in the midst of everyone wearing masks, but instead it's more of a perspective of looking back at that time. So it can be more of a timeless movie, versus here we are in the middle of this, and the perspective just wouldn't have been the same.
Yeah, like good comment on that too is like Panini, for instance, right? Like, they're in the film, their CEO and their VP of marketing is, but like, because of COVID, we couldn't get to their manufacturing process to get the footage that we wanted to make it the cinematography that we did. Like, a lot of people's comments on, HGA's, our kind of vision of what they look like in house look better than what they were putting out. And it's just because our cinematography is great, right? So we wanted to do that for everything, but we couldn't get in because of COVID. It was 100% no. So we took what they had, from B footage standpoint with, I think it was 19 Prism, and then some really old stuff from that end. So, it's just, we had to deal with what we had to deal with from that end at the time.
Real quick, in terms of time frame, when did you start interviewing and filming, and when did it wrap? Because I think a lot of people don't understand the time frame that this actually was filmed in, and think that this was 6 months ago where this was filmed, versus I think it was March of 2021. Like, we're talking about over a year and a half, or somewhere around a year and a half. And even that post-production turnaround is quite quick. So what was the time frame, just so people get in the mind space of what was relevant, what companies were up and coming, and what the scene was like back then?
Yeah, so I'll start overarching. A feature film takes 3 to 5 years to come to market. So we did it in less than 2, just to kind of give you a perspective of how fast we try to get this out. And the reason why I pushed the envelope on that is, one, I deal with like tech business mindset, right? So I try to move fast in general. I didn't come from the marketplace, so I pushed people as much as possible. And I knew that the card market could change. I mean, the card market changes monthly. So no matter what you do in terms of a documentary, if you're trying to put one out that's like right now versus like 10, 20 years ago, every single month it's going to change. So it is what it is. You try to deal with it. It's why, like, in the documentary, I didn't push one way or another. So for instance, the vintage versus modern, for instance, we had 2 people talk, 2 different people primarily talk about why they like vintage, and the other one talked about why they like modern. And they both didn't do the other, right? But we never told you which way was right. We just want you to go find your community. So if you love vintage, you're going to end up finding the community that talks about vintage all the time. If you find modern, you're going to find that. So with that said, this was like mid 2020 when I was kind of getting through ramp up, right? In November 2020, we started doing interviews with production people. We solidified all of that in a script in February, which that was probably 6 months faster than most people do with the script perspective. From there,
real quick, Chris, how did you interview more people that maybe didn't make the cut into the movie? And how did you decide on the casting part of it? Did you have kind of here's the content creators and here's the manufacturers, here's the breakers, and just kind of, how did you kind of map that out?
Was it based on the demographic, or was it based on your what you wanted the film to be for your own reasons?
Yeah, I think it's a mix. For instance, Leighton, I would say Leighton Sports Cars is a complete mix. One, I personally did a lot of breaks with Leighton, so I like that community. And again, it's like, what community do you fit in, right? From a Leighton breaking perspective, though, the reason why we ended up with them is primarily because they're the most kid friendly. I'd say they don't cuss. They're not backyard breakers. They're not Blez. All these breakers are great companies, but I felt like because we were doing a PG movie. That we decided to go with Leighton from that perspective, right? When you look at grading, at the time, there's no arguing this. At the time it was Beckett and PSA at the top, and then SGC was second, right? At the time too, when we wanted to, so we looked at PSA and Beckett. There was some contractual things that we couldn't get around on one of those two, and at the end of the day, I felt like Beckett had the most rich history all around, and that's why I chose them instead of PSA. I just think that their background outside of just grading fit better in our film as much as possible. So when you look at a feature film and you think, okay, this isn't just for the collector, but also like, how do we get more collectors to come in, or how do we educate your family or friends that hate that you collect cards or talk about cards? How do we educate them as much as possible to make all ends meet? You got to really think about who's going to fit in that from not just a business perspective, but like also a culture perspective throughout the whole film, right? So Beckett felt good from that perspective.
I was going to ask you about PSA, but before you go into HGA, I just thought of this. Did you try to get a hold of, or I guess Dr. Beckett, just being like the biggest name as far, and obviously the company is his company, but did you have the opportunity to try to get in touch with him, or to add him in, because that would have been kind of a cool. I was just thinking of like, who else could be in here that could add some spice to it, and he would be willing for sure.
Yeah, like that would have been awesome. We couldn't make it work because of the schedule and timing of it with him. It just didn't happen. So that's why Jeremy Murray was in it, right? From Beckett's perspective. And then from PSA, I mean, we had a good 5-7 calls with them. We were really digging into like every aspect. We even we chose PWCC. There's a big reason. One of the big reasons is because we landed Rob Go to talk about the Mickey Mantle, card, which was the best, the biggest purchase ever at the time. And PWC housed it. So one of the reasons why we were able to do it with them is because we could go on site and get that card, right? And have that special moment in our movie as well. We even looked at King Golden, talked to him quite a bit, from an auction house perspective. So it wasn't like I just chose my favorite people. We did go around, figure it out, talk to everyone, figure out what the script was, understand who would be in the actual film from each company in each area, and fit them in culturally as well to make sure that we kind of hopefully, across the spectrum got them in there from that. And then we wanted startups in, and we wanted, people like Brad that come in and trying to find their way and their journey. And he's collecting, Kobe Bryant cards that are PSA grades are between, call it $100 to $500, and he's making $80 to $400 on it profit, right, Brad?
Those were the days.
He didn't mess up the PSA one, right?
Good times.
Brad was one of those investors that were lower in. Right?
You captured Brad's one moment in time there.
Yeah. Well, this is a time capsule for me, man.
For sure, but like Brad's got a great face, got a great personality. Will from a seeing him on a big screen is going to be a good view as well, right? So you have a little bit of everything that you got to think of, because I'm not just throwing this up on YouTube and moving on, right? I don't even own the movie at this point for North America. Someone buys the right, like a distributor buys the rights from you and then does what they do with the film, right? From a feature film perspective. So you do your best. And, I felt like it would be good to have a time capsule of the rise, because if you look at online, when you go to view it, it says it's the rise of the sports card market in this, in today's world, right? So it's primarily focused on that 2016, call it, to 2020. And that's why some of the characters are in it that you probably wouldn't see otherwise, like Vegas Dave. You love or hate, right? Like, and we can talk about those characters as well as we move on here.
Yeah, and there was a question here, Ziggy, why wasn't Dustin in the movie? And so the weekly show, I believe, came way after this, because this is again March. Filming March 2021. Probably initially reached out December 2020, January 2021, something like that. But I also thought Dustin wasn't branded Sports Card Dad back then. Had he been branded Sports Card Dad versus the Personal Finance Dad, he probably would have been easier to spot on anyone's radar.
But to be honest, well, yeah, Brad, you were a stretch to be in this movie, but I would have been a stretch. I would have been a stretch too. Honestly, like it wouldn't have hurt my feelings to not have been invited to it. You know, I mean, like I understand, but I understand Chris's view as far as just from, you know, visually, you know, you're in LA and you're doing your thing. He needed to get somebody and he found you. So, you know, we'll see all the successes riding on you as being
and he likes to say he came with a bloated face. I'm like,
oh my God,
Brad, of all days.
Seriously, if you look
at
that
the
movie,
after your bike accident, you showed up and you're like all like Skeletor.
That was August 2020.
Humidity of Florida didn't help.
Dude, that was 8 months later, 9 months later. But also the gyms, I believe, were still closed. So I was not in good shape either, because living in California, I think the gyms only started to open with masks on, outdoors only, around March or April 2021. That's how crazy it was. Outdoor masks on in California.
Even late in the year. Like for people that don't have, like when I was there, one of the reasons I moved out, you had to run with the mask outside if you wanted to run through the city, like with the mask on, like you're outside, not around anybody but running, you know. It's just, that was the time we lived in. So Brad was stuck in his apartment or house and not doing any activity.
It was more about Brad was just available. You know, if you
I'll do it.
Phone, I tried to get Nat Turner. I tried to get these people, but yeah, and Brad was available 7 days a week.
Yeah.
So there you go.
Yeah, we got really lucky with Steve Aoki. Like it took us like so like I think people don't understand too. It's like, why didn't you have this person? Why do you have this? Like we reached out to Gary Vee. Gary Vee wasn't interested in being in the movie, right? Like we try to get as many perspectives as possible across the board. Some people we turned down, some people turned us down. With Stevie Aoki, we didn't go directly to him because we knew he didn't really do this kind of content from this end. We got like 6 intros to him before his team was like, all right, let's talk, right? It took quite a bit. And we got so lucky because by the time it got done, we were able to schedule him. And this was late May by the time we did our Vegas people, and he's in Vegas. So we got lucky. We had 2 days that we weren't filming. He could be available one of those 2 days that we weren't filming, and we had 1 hour for him. And then 2 days later, he flew off to the first, he was back on stage, right? Doing his music 2 days later. If we were not able to catch him at that time, we lost him because he went out and did his whole road show of music. So like little pieces fell together like that too. And it's like, you want as many people in the card space as possible across the spectrum, but there's an agenda of a script, who fits in that. And then it's like, it's COVID time, you know, people can't do it. So I even have somebody that one of my cousins knows Mike Trout's family really well. And I don't know if it was released back then, but you know, he had a kid recently. You know, I think because his wife might have been pregnant at the time or whatnot, or right after that, maybe they were trying, but like we couldn't get it done, right? Just because of little things like that. So and that's a bummer sometimes, but it worked out on the end. I think we put the right crew on the film.
Question, Chris, is there any possibility for a part 2 or a follow-up, or, you know, is this part of a series maybe, or is this more of just like a one and done thing?
Well, as much as the card market changes monthly, somebody, you know, like somebody could come out and do another one, but like I could sit down and do a whole new movie just based on the last, you know, 5 or 6 months. Yeah. But in terms of relevancy, I don't think there's enough relevant information since I released it. You know, there's things like, you know, Fanatics now owns Topps, stuff like that. We kind of knew that before other people did because of, you know, not being able to get Topps in our movie, but having to work with their legal team and stuff on like getting their Topps logos and stuff. We ended up having to do that with Fanatics, right? At the end of the day. But at the end of the day, like those things don't really change and from the mindset of what we did the film, because like, for instance, in the film, if you watched it, we say that, hey, the licenses change often. Here's what it used to be. Here's what it is today. So like when people see that Fanatics changed it and you're not in the sports card market, you're gonna be like, okay, that makes sense. Like it's just somebody else's license a day, right? So I try to position it that way in the film so that it kind of continued throughout versus, why was Fanatics not in it? Well, Fanatics, we literally wrapped up late May. So Fanatics didn't buy tops, right? So there's just no way of getting it put in. I think also people don't realize, like, you throw up a YouTube video, you can edit it in a day or two, right? Like, we ended in May, and then we started, I think mid-June, started editing this. We edited it through November, I think 17th or late November. It takes that long to edit a movie, like from a feature film perspective. So, it took us 6 months to put the crew together almost and film the 2 months. And then it took you 6 months to edit it. And then because it's a feature film, you got to send it through festival season to try to win awards and stuff like that, right? From a video cinematography perspective. That's at least 6 months. We could have went the whole year this year and launched it next year instead of, late 2022. But because of how the card market was changing, I felt like we had to get this out in 2022. So I could have won a couple more awards out there in the festival world, but I felt like 3 was enough to just go ahead and move on to getting this distributed out.
Yeah, the post-production is the reason why I hated doing the YouTube videos, because talking in front of camera is fun and thinking of a creative script can be cool, but the post-production for me was like, this is a nightmare. And so I can only imagine with how many hours did you say you had on camera? You said you had like a whole stack of memory cards just filled up.
Yeah, that's the thing too, is like when you do these many interviews, I could have cut the crew in half. I had so much content and actually did 2 documentaries at the time and had no overlap. That's how much we did. And part of me being newer and wanting to really understand all of the, essentially all the characters and where they would fit in the film, and not just Leighton's not just card breaking, right? And things like that. I was at everybody's place probably an hour longer than I should have been, asking questions, because I wanted to make sure I could have enough content for them to be out everywhere else in the film as much as possible. I think that's why you see Jeff Wilson kind of look like he kind of was a standout in terms of time frame throughout the film, because the way that he talks, he set up perfect narration throughout a lot of different areas. So it was really easy because of how much, interviewing we did with him, that he ended up being kind of a narrator, call it, for our film. And that wasn't on purpose. I didn't know that was going to happen until we got behind the scenes and started editing and watching everyone. But that was a long way to say we had a good 12 to 15 hours of interviewing, which we did about 1 terabyte of data per person almost, which is crazy. Usually you do that per 4 people, I would say, in terms of the space that you have. For anyone that knows from a filming perspective, my team was starting to get on me by halfway through that we were using too much data. We were having to go to Walgreens and find more of those little, things to have data to hold as much as we had. And we were shooting this in 6K, even though it's 4K's out now. So the data RAM and everything that you needed and all that good technology stuff, we took a lot of it up for sure.
There was a couple questions. So in terms of the film festivals, what were the film festivals it won awards through, or that you submitted to?
Yeah, so Silk Road Cannes, we won the best documentary for United States feature film. We won the Rhode Island Flickr Awards as well. I also won the Best Damn Documentary Awards, and I won a Male Director Award as well. So it was pretty cool. We have 3 of the awards. We actually had 4, but 3 I think are up on our IMDb or IMDb, whichever way you say it.
So is this in an attempt, I guess, is this your new career, or is it just kind of one of your businesses? Because you mentioned you've done different things. So this is kind of like, hey, obviously you knew the right people, you brought on the right people, and you were able, obviously like an all-star cast, to make it all happen. But do you see yourself, was this more of passion project that you were able to make happen, or is this kickstarting more documentaries for you?
Yeah, started as a passion project for sure. I think it allowed my wife, Paula, which was, the executive producer and the casting director and stuff like that, to appreciate cards more at the time too, right? Because, a lot of wives probably out there, they don't really care what you're doing when you're buying, guys on cardboard for various dollars.
This is the only way you could get your spouse to be approval, like
Exactly,
to approve of your card stuff. Okay, got it.
So, but yeah, like from a documentary standpoint, I'm not passionate in enough spaces to probably do another documentary because you have to really love it. You know, like you don't really have a script. You know, if you could imagine, like when you're trying to build a script of 12 hours and your editing team has to figure out how you want it to be done and have to find that data, it's really grueling. So the last 6 months of this was like just a job, you know, after you get through hanging out with all the cool people out there in the card space. But we will do a feature film that's more of a thriller, not a documentary. But again, like it takes 3 to 5 years.
Sports card thriller?
No. I'm the guy behind the Adam Sandler sports car thriller. No, we're going to do just a normal thriller movie, not in the card space. That's going to probably not start shooting until probably Q1 of 2024 because of how much production and every, stuff has to happen on the back end to start. But, like I mentioned, it takes 3 to 5 years to come out for a feature film. So I might be able to do max 5 in my whole lifetime, if that makes sense.
So what if someone says, you know what, I want to make a documentary around sports cards and I can do it better. I just need to know the budget it would take to do something like this. I'm curious, how much of an investment, even if it's ballpark, would it cost to put something like this together where you're not really paying a cast, but you do have a crew, you have a lot of back end work, you have travel, you have a lot of costs that I'm not even thinking of. Yeah. But to put something this high production out there into the world, what would that cost in terms of just a range?
Yeah, I would say a normal documentary, people will tell you will cost around $1 million to do from a theatrical perspective. One of the big things for
marketing
does not include marketing. That's just to get it done. That's just literally to get it to like, hey, will somebody buy my movie out there?
So you're telling me if
take it to a festival to sell it
if Dustin's able to liquidate his Jameis Winston collection, he'll only need another $999,000.
You'll need every
$950.
Jameis is going to be back. Don't worry about Jameis. He's coming back.
So I didn't spend that much money on it though. Like again, I didn't come from. There's a big difference that I would say from an educational perspective of spending money on this. I came from the business mindset. I didn't come from, I want to do a film and I want to go waste all my money like a lot of people do when they want to do a film and they just have extra money laying around. I cut the fat. I like to say I cut the fat off it, right? Like everywhere. So I was able to bring this high caliber for less than that, for sure. There's probably a website or two out there that kind of average where ours came in at that you could find roughly of what we spent pre-marketing. But yeah, it's quite a bit of money. Like for instance, if you calculate 8 people that I took around, you have to buy them all flights. You're on a 3.5 week road show across the country. You fly to 8 places. So if you average $250 a ticket times 8 plus me and Paula times 8, right? Again, because of all the locations back and forth. The hotel rooms for everybody, the day rate for people are averaging $250 per day to $1,500 per day, depending on how good you are and what role you do. You have to pay that even if they work for 5 hours, right? Or 2 hours. So if you're paying that average is, call it $500 a person times 8 people times 17 days on the road, it gets up there very quickly just from that side, of the business, not including, think about the people that it takes to edit a film. And if it takes 5 to 6 months to edit a film, you're paying them, to edit that for 5 or 6 months.
Even like even the low budget, like scary movies, because horror movies are typically pretty inexpensive compared to everything else. But even those, you'll see it's like, it's a couple $1 million to make.
Exactly.
Blair Witch Project or something, and
you're like, that was the worst produced for horror movie. It was probably $2.3 million. It's just like crazy the amount and like what I mean by cut off the fat is like we had 8 people doing what 30, 40 people do typically on set. Like Brad's been on set. When you do a commercial, you're going to have more. You probably have 30 people on a commercial set sometimes, right? 40 people, 100 sometimes.
What's crazy is when you go to a set and it's a print ad. It's not even a commercial. It's just for a magazine or something print. And you're like, oh my God, they have the craft services, a makeup person, a hairstylist, 3 people on lights,
right.
Like a director, a second, a second camera person, and all this is just for a still picture, not even for a movie. So like sometimes when, I think people forget how much work can go into any sort of project, especially when they're not familiar with that industry. And you just see the finished product and you're like, whatever it is, that's fine. That's a nice picture. It's a nice commercial. And you don't realize the amount of people and resources and money and editing and whatever that's involved. It's insane.
Yeah, we literally did probably a 65-person project film with 8 people plus Paul and I. Like, we really cut everything down to the best crew possible that was willing to go through it with us. And I just wasn't willing to spend money on the additional lighting person when we could show up 30 minutes early with our crew, right? That was the business side of me from that end. And I think it still worked out cinematography wise. I don't think you watch the film and say, wow, they had 8 people. I think you watch the film and say, wow, they spent $1 million.
Ziggy had kind of an interesting question. He's talking about Jeff, sports card investor, paying or investing. Was there anybody, not even just Jeff, but did anyone participate? I guess
I paid Chris. I paid Chris to be on.
I know Brad. I know Brad didn't pay for a damn thing, but he didn't even pay for his sandwiches, I'm sure. But did anyone invest? And anyone come in and help pay for it? I guess that was in the movie.
Zero investment. I have no investment in any company or any person in the film. They have no investment in me. They didn't give me money. We, had to pay people that we had to pay and do things like that. Jeff Wilson was just, one of the cast members, and he was gracious enough to give us the time that he did. And like I mentioned earlier, Z, I don't know if you heard, but Jeff Wilson he just set up the way that he answered all of our questions, just made it easy for him to become a narrator. That was like a total fluke. It just happened that he does a good job of opening every section based on how he talks. So we were able to make him be that person that you see often. And in a film, especially a feature film, you need to see people often, especially in a documentary, right? Like, you got to be able to connect to certain people throughout. And that he kind of brought that in. If you notice, Vegas Dave and Rob Go typically come on scene around the same time in the movie. They were good contradictory people to each other, right? Rob Go collects vintage, and Vegas Dave only collects modern. That was very clear. That's always been very clear.
Yeah,
but the way that they were doing a good back and forth, right? So it made sense to have them talk about the same stuff, if that makes sense from a director standpoint.
There were a couple comments around Vegas Dave because he's such a controversial figure in sports cards, and almost just like a hater. You would think of the entire hobby, even though he's been an investor in it. So what's the thought process with him specifically? Was it just to add a character that would ruffle feathers, that would add some contrast, or what's the thought there?
Yeah. So you love or hate Vegas Dave, like hands down. There's so many people that hate Vegas Dave that when you comment on Vegas Dave right now, they might have left the live stream, right? That's how much somebody would hate Vegas Dave. If you look at the time span and what we did from a documentary standpoint, he sold the largest sale of a modern card at the time. So whether you hate him or not, and again, we're not discriminating who's in our film. Like, we're just showing you both sides of the story. And Vegas Dave, as much as you love or hate him, he was part of that community. He was very, loud about how it was going to go up in that 16, 17 timeframe. He sold that card. And then, he was doing the crazy burning of the card and stuff like that on the back end and saying that the market's going to crash. Right. So, and of course, like, he's a great character. You need a villain in every film, feature film, right? He was an easy villain. And luckily he was, he doesn't do interviews, like, in general, a lot of times, but he never does card collecting interviews. So we actually, it was a privilege to have him in our film, because, like, you don't get to see that side of Dave. And I think when you watch it, you start to like him if you hate him a little bit every once in a while. And you're like, oh man, then he goes and says something like Vegas Dave again. And you're like, oh, I remembered I hate him, right? So I think, like, you would appreciate it whether you hate him or love him when you're seeing it, because you get to see a lot of background that you never knew about him. Like, he was collecting cards when he was 14. He was doing card shows. He was like he would rent out hotels and have people, if you watch it, have people come in and buy tables off him. Stuff like that. Like,
he's very entrepreneurial.
And he's just a marketing genius, right? Like, the way he does, his attitude is just complete marketing for his following is what I would like to say about it. Like, it is what it is.
like having him really added an edge because it was very positive, and most people are positive and are happy, and I guess, and it's just informative, but there's not really a dark side, and he brought the dark side, the
Right.
the negative opinions, or just like the doom and gloom kind of stuff. Like he really brought that when this was a time of just prosperity, and it
Yeah.
was like a renaissance for the hobby, and he was the one that's like, no, it's I'm responsible for this. It's grown because of me. It wouldn't be anywhere without me and what I did. And it's all going to crash, and I'll burn this card. And so like you
Yeah.
needed, like he definitely added a villain aspect, like an
Yeah.
antagonist type
Yeah.
of
Like I'm even
role.
bipolar for my own movie. I have my collecting hat on, and then I have my directing hat on. And I gotta feed both ends to make this film work, right?
Was there a backup plan? Because it does make sense for a documentary. You've got to have kind of both. You have to have kind of competing interests. Was Vegas Dave kind of a linchpin just to make it all work because of that, or was there a backup villain, or was there other people that you had thought about if that wasn't going to work?
So I knew right away, because I'm a card collector at heart, and I'm a maniac that loves to rip as many cards as possible. That's why I sell so much on eBay. It's just because I have to do it to rip the cards that I rip. So I knew I didn't want a hit piece. So I didn't reach out. I didn't try to reach out to like people that flame the market in general. Vegas Dave was the only one that we reached out to, solely because he did the super factor sell, and he did a lot of he even did charities throughout that last year to essentially open up 1986 Flair basketball to hit Jordans and stuff. So he was still involved leading up to like where I felt like was a good timing to nab him, and we got lucky that we got him. And once we interviewed him and we got what we could from him, we knew right away, like, boom, that's our villain. And thank God we got a villain, from a director standpoint, because as I saw in some comments, every movie needs a villain, right? And if you're in the card collecting space, is there a bigger villain? There's not, right? So like from a Vegas Dave perspective, you got the biggest villain in the space in that movie.
A question on your perspective on how it turned out, but then there's another question here about profiting, talking about the business side of it. So for one, what's your take on the finished product versus what you thought it would be or could be going into it, I guess, 2 years ago?
Yeah, so I know there's always going to be controversy, especially in the card collecting community, because like a lot of us, and like myself, we watch YouTube videos every single day about the card community, right? Whether that's Pac-Man, Scotty B cards, you name it, you're out there. You're out there watching videos. So as I alluded to earlier, I know the card market changes monthly. So again, like from my perspective as a director and editing, was like we got what we could in the time frame that we did. Even like Upper Deck, we finally got a hold of them, but it was too late. We already wrapped up filming, so we couldn't have Upper Deck in the film. Like it just happened, that way. And it'd been like, oh, that'd been great, because they could have done a perspective from there in that end. If Fanatics was involved, if it was later on, that would have been cool, because we could have said, where did the future go from that perspective, right? So if you just look at it from the time span, how fast we got it out, how fast the card market changes, and how we never really pushed the audience in one way or another. We just said, hey, look, here's what's going on, whether you like it or not in that space. We don't answer that question for you, so that you can go on and, come to you guys and watch a live and join your family, or go watch Ziggy's, YouTubes that are coming out, or Pac-Man's, or, if you like Backyard Breaks, you go to them. If you like Leighton, you go to them. The goal was to whet the appetite enough to go in and research about cards to find your family in the card space. That was the goal. And I think that we accomplished that goal. So I want to change the film that it is today. I would say from a critic standpoint in the card space, the only thing I guess I would have done maybe is I could have waited 5 years, 10 years. So it wasn't as like punch in the face of 2020, since it just happened, right? And the card market changed so drastically this last year. I guess that would be the only thing. But then we want to have a film out there about the card market where people would enjoy it, be able to watch it with their family, make their family realize hopefully why they're part of this community, right? Because you got to have a thrill and a feature film out there of an industry for people to really take time to look at it, because no one's just going to go on YouTube and watch random videos, right, of car breaks. So you got to look at it from that perspective well, and I think we accomplished that really well in our film.
And then from the business side, Something Sports Cards asked, did you profit when you sold it? Is this your best sports card investments?
It's my best film. It's my best film investment.
This is one of one, though.
One of one, baby.
One of one. Okay. All right. We'll leave it there.
Yeah.
And then how would you grade yourself as a director? Because this is your debut as well.
Yeah. I get goosebumps just thinking about that question. Like, I don't know how to answer that question because it's one of one, but the coolest thing that ever happened to me during this, besides being at Rich Layton's place and being able to see his personal collection and saying, and biting my tongue not to be like, hey, can I buy this card off you while I'm filming him, was getting the best director male award. Like, that was super cool. That made me feel like, from a cinematography perspective, because I wasn't the technical guy, that went to school for filming. One of my big ifs were like, am I going to make this film just look so outdated and old school or not? And so that was really cool, because that made me feel like, hey, we actually filmed this correctly from a cinematography perspective.
Very cool.
From a rating perspective, I don't know, man. I can't rate myself because I don't, it's myself. And, maybe if you do a poll sometime you should do a poll on Instagram and say, how was the cinematography?
Yeah. Well, what's interesting is if we got the perspective from people in the hobby, it would just be the personalities and the way the hobby has changed. I'd be curious what 100 or 1,000 viewers who had no idea what sports cards were or what had happened during COVID, if they watched, what their perspective on the film would be. Because, when you're in it, there's a lot of criticism based on all the knowledge you have, but when you're out of it, it's all new knowledge to you. So anyway, I enjoyed it.
Our ratings are above 90% across the board on platforms, which usually a good rating nowadays is, 65 to 80%. So I think, from that perspective, we did really well. And again, it's a feature film, that's meant for the masses. Like, the card community itself cannot hold a feature film to do what it needs to do in the public's eye, right? There's just not enough eyes in the community. So you got to think of it that way too when you're building a feature film. The guys like Chasing Cardboard and stuff like that, they do awesome, content and stuff, but like that is completely different than a feature film, right? That's a docuseries, and you have so much more breadth of content that you can go after and tackle and have a different kind of mindset. So when you look at it from a director standpoint, I take off my hat from a collector standpoint. I got to think of things like that, obviously, when it comes to a feature film.
I have one more question before we open it up to any questions in the audience, and before Dustin hopefully makes a noise or a sound. But so there are a lot of content creators that are watching, and they've been making YouTube videos, or they've thought about making YouTube videos or Instagram posts or whatever. Now that you've gone through making the ultimate piece of content, which is a feature film, and going from pretty much scratch and learning everything the hard way, and knowing or learning how to narrate a storyline and have all these elements that are needed, what are some tips for someone on their own content creation journey that you could leave them with that would hopefully help them make better content?
Yeah, lighting is the number one kind of like thing that you can do to change everything from a content perspective. If you have good lighting, you're golden. I would say, even though you're not uploading in 4K, make sure that you're actually filming in 6K or 4K. It makes all the difference from that perspective. Also, cutting quickly in and out of conversations. So like when you do an interview, we have a lot of content that we clipped out and we send that approved from the distributor that they can use when we do interviews with me, so that you can cut us out and not just, have, this is live, so it's different, right? But when you're watching a YouTube video, you're going to cut out if you're just interviewing people or talking on the screen too long, if you don't have B footage. So B footage, so it's like lighting, it's 4K plus, and then it's B footage. B footage makes or breaks you. The hardest part was finding enough B footage for an hour and 30, it's crazy the amount of B footage you need for an hour and 36 minutes. You get to the point where you're out buying B footage from people. Like we went to PWCC's place and they allowed us to essentially pull out based on like people that gave us approval that had collections and pull out and film what we need to. And we did really cool film shots of cards throughout the movie. We did that at every location. Every person had at least, even Brad, you brought like, I think 10 cards with you, and it was in Florida. Everybody had 10 to 50 cards. And we even went to a place that stocks cards, and we still used every single card that we could, that we filmed in that movie to make the B footage work. For instance, if you guys might notice when we talk about, when they talk about 1996 was when like serial number cards actually became a big deal, right? Because of Kobe Bryant. We didn't have, so Rob Go didn't buy that card yet, that the number Kobe Bryant, which that would have been cool because we couldn't find one. That was one of the 2 places where we actually used the same Kobe Bryant kind of shot in HDA cases as we did in a different part. I think we only did that with 2 different footages, and we tried not to do, you try not to do that at all, but that's how much B footage you need. So I think if you do good B footage while you talk, and not just have yourself on the screen the whole time, you have good lighting, you're golden from that perspective. That was probably long-winded, so sorry if that was.
I put up some B-roll, so it was okay.
Nice.
Dustin, any final questions?
No, I mean, I watched the whole thing, and I agree. I think I think that the tricky part is, for me, I'm in it every single day. So I'm making YouTube videos, I'm watching it. So a lot of the sports card 101 stuff, that stuff is just kind of, for me, that's, and it's not, but I'm not the usual average person that you're trying to reach, so that's the difference. You're looking, as you said, it's more for a mainstream audience. So, taking that into account, though, I thought it was well done. I mean, it was, and like you said, I mean, you have a very short time frame of filming, and then you have a very long post-production world that you're living in at that point, and you can't control all the changes that come at that, and there's just been so many, so yeah, I mean, I think
that's a great point.
Good stuff.
Like, for instance, like that's why we didn't have SGC, PSA and Beckett in it, right? Like you don't, like, it wouldn't work to have that many people in it, right?
I don't even know if he'd be allowed into PSA's headquarters back then because it was in Southern California.
Yeah, that was one of the issues I think when we were talking, is like, where do we film it, right? And like, what can we do from that filming perspective? We would have had, if Stevie Aoki wasn't in it, and if we got, like, let's say we got Logan Paul from a Pokemon perspective, we wouldn't have had Stevie Aoki in it, right? Because like we only needed 1 celeb. Like we didn't need 2 celebs in there. We needed 1 guy like Brad that, is investing in a way that you're trying to make rent per month, or sell a $100 card for $300. We only needed one Rob Go, right? That bought the Mickey Mantle. We didn't need, him and Nat Turner talking about their collection, because from a mainstream perspective and just from a ability to move from section to section to keep everyone actually with their eyes on the screen for an hour and a half about card collecting, that would just dilute the film, right? So we tried to do as many interviews as possible up front to figure out that cast, and then drained it down from there, to your point.
And now we've got part 2, which is Brad's card downfall on that ultimate slide into homelessness.
Well, we'll see. It needs to be like a Rocky type of sequel, though. Like we need, like the second movie is the downfall, but then like when Batman is like in the cave and he's wilting away. Batman, he's gonna get beat up by life at some points, but then he'll come back. So
on the side, I've been talking to Chris about how I can make the second part of this, which is Brad's the Brad sinking into nothingness.
The second film is about my demise, but the third film, it sets up the third film. But question here by a collector's dream: if you were to make another movie about sports cards, like if you said, all right, that was a great one, I have the hunch, or I have the feeling that I want to make another one, but angled differently or with a different focus, even if it was a company that was going to pay you, say like, it's not your money, but we just like your direction, we just want you to make another film, what would you include in a follow-up movie, hypothetically?
Yeah, so I would say that in our film currently today, like the cards that you see in the film is 50-50. So I think the question is more along the lines of like the stories behind the vintage, right? I'm a vintage collector outside of modern as well. I'm a mix. One of my first sets I built was a 1968 top set. So the thing is, when you're doing a theatrical film and you're looking at it from a mass audience perspective, you have to find really good stories that haven't really hit the market a lot of times, right? So like, for instance, the Vegas day burning the card, you guys got a lot of behind the scenes of what really kind of entailed with that, and then how that transition happened with Steve so seamlessly to get that card, which you can't just make up or find. So like, and it's really hard from a vintage perspective to find that sometimes. So from the story side, if I was just going to do, I wouldn't be able to do a feature film, like it or not. You know, with it being fully focused on vintage, there's not going to be, I think, enough ups and downs that you need in a theatrical film to make that happen. But that's why you have Chasing Cardboard that's doing it, you know, doing a road show like American Pickers, right? Like that is built for a docuseries, right? So when you think about filming, you got to think about who's your audience. Are they going to continue to be, are they going to watch it throughout the whole thing? And what kind of stories can you plug in to make that happen? And I think vintage fits into content in various ways better than other ways, I guess is the best way of stating that fact.
Awesome, man. Well, Chris, we really appreciate you coming on. Guys, check out Behind the Card. I think it's a great movie to watch with the female that might not understand cards, that who's in your life. So if you say, hey, honey, I want to pick the movie tonight, and this will help you understand the excitement I have in sports cards. Maybe it's a good.
Brad's just using this to get dates. He's like, let's just flip through the channels. Oh wait, what's this one? It's about.
Yeah.
I'm in this.
If you buy it ahead of time, and then maybe it'll pop up on your smart TV, you know, something like that. But seriously though, if you're dating someone or there's a family member that just does not understand your obsession with cards and maybe doesn't have patience or tolerate your obsession with cards, maybe this is a good way to introduce them in a way that they'll understand versus you just yelling at them and throwing things at them.
You couldn't say it better, Brad.
So bloated though, Brad.
Oh my God, man. I'm looking at myself like, oh my God, it looks like I just had all the Chipotle the day before and all that sodium is filled in my cheeks and hadn't worked out and I was on a flight and all that stuff, but whatever, you know.
That's exactly what the movie is about, right? It's like, how do you get your family members, your friends, and your significant others that give you a hard time or you can't talk about cards around because they don't care about it to sit down and actually enjoy something? I think we give you that content good enough for them to be like, okay, I understand like the industry now enough to like understand why you're in it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, guys, have a great one. My bladder is about to explode. So, guys,
thanks for having me on, guys.
You got it. Have a good one. Hit the like and see you soon.
Later, guys.
Thanks, guys.